In today's video, we're going to take a look at using the Elm-Lang navigation package to add URL support to a small Elm application. In this case, the application is Do You Even Elm, which is available at doyouevenelm.com. It's a small app where you enter your GitHub username, it shows you your profile, and it shows you how many Elm repositories you have. In this case, you can see I've got 261 and 24 of them have been written in Elm. This app works, this is me running it locally, and you can enter names and hit enter to search here. However, there's no support for URLs, so if I wanted to share this data with someone else, I can't link them to doyouevenelm.com/jackfranklin. That wouldn't work currently. In this screencast, we're going to add Elm navigation so that that will work, so that when we hit enter, we see the new username in the URL, and I can send that link to someone. I'm going to assume you're a little bit familiar with Elm, and we're going to dive directly into the navigation package today. So I've got the navigation docs open on the Elm package repository. All I've done locally to save time is install the navigation package, but we're not using it yet. So what we're going to do now is start looking at how we can add the package to this application. All this code will be put onto GitHub, and I'll include a link in the description, so if you want to go and grab the code and see what changed and play with it locally, you'll be able to. So the first thing you need to do is import the navigation package. Then in our main, rather than it being an HTML program, it becomes a navigation program. So we wrap the HTML program that's provided by Elm in a navigation program, which does all the same things, but also adds the URL support that we need. So I'll change HTML here to navigation. When you turn an app into a navigation program, it takes the init, view, update, and subscriptions functions, although their types change slightly, and we'll look at that in a second. But you also need to supply a first argument, which is a message type that will be sent to your update function when the URL changes. So I'm going to call this URL change. Now over here in my types file, I need to define this. So we'll say URL change. And this is going to take in a navigation.location. This is a record containing lots of information about the change that just occurred. And to make that work, I would also need to import navigation. You can see here we now have a type mismatch. Navigation.program expects an init function that actually takes a location and returns the model and command. So now we need to go and update our init function to deal with the location. This happens because the init function is called with the first location. So if I hit the index page, it will be called with one location, which is the home page. But if I go to doyouevenelm.com/jack, it should be hit with that /jack, that URL. This means that you can update your app so it displays the right page when the user first loads the website based on the URL they're visiting. So I'll update init to now say we're going to take a location and return a model and message. And I'm going to just update the body to say init location. We're not going to use that location for a second, but we are going to define it for now. And just to save typing, I'm also going to actually expose the location type in here as well. The next error is in our update. In the case, we don't have a branch for the URL change type, so we should go and fix that now. So when there's a URL change, we'll get this new location object. And for now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say let underscore equals debug.log location, new location, in, and I'll just return model and command.none. So we're going to do absolutely nothing when this happens for now. But this will at least just let us see in the command line in the console what's happening. So now we have an init function that takes a location and can use that. And we also have an update function which has a case for the URL change. What we're going to do is make the init function actually immediately call the update function with the new URL. That means that we can deal with the first URL on the page exactly as we would with any other URL. So in the init location, I can say let model commands equals update, and we're going to manually call this with the URL change location, like so, and the model will be initial model, and then we can return model and command, like so. And of course this is a little verbose, so we can just get rid of this and just return the update. So now when we init, we're going to immediately call update with the URL change, the first URL, and we'll pass in the initial model as well. This works for this particular application. If you need to deal with the initial URL differently to how you deal with updates to the URLs, then you might not want to do this and you would have separate logic in your init function, which is absolutely fine. And if we go back to the browser, you can see that we've now logged the location record that we got. So we got the href, we got the host name, the protocol, and various things that we can access. The most important one here for us is the path name, which here is /, but that will let us know where the user is. You can see that if I go to /jackfranklin and hit enter and load that page, you can see the path name is now /jackfranklin. And this is the bit we care about, because based on that path name, we're going to want to update this text box with the right username, and then make the search and look on GitHub to grab that data for that user. So the first step is based on the value of the path in the URL, we should populate this text box with the right username. So if we take a look at our initial model, you can see that the username field is just hard coded to be my name, Jack Franklin. What we want to do is actually set this based on the URL that the user hits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the username to begin with an empty string. So now I've set the username as an empty string. By default, when we load the page, the input box will be empty. We want to leave that be if the user's visited just the home page. But if they visit /Jack, this username should be set to Jack. So to do this, we can use our update function to update the username when the URL changes. So I'm going to leave my debugging in, and we can now update this model and say the username should equal the new location's path name. Let's go and see if that's working as we expect. If I refresh here, you can see that we're nearly there, but of course path name includes the slash at the beginning, so we're getting /Jack Franklin, so I need to go and remove that. The Elm string package has a function called dropLeft, which will take a certain amount of characters from the start of a string, so we can use dropLeft, give it 1 to remove the starting slash. So we can say username equals string.dropLeft 1 new location dot path name. And then we'll update here our username to be that username. And we'll also need to import string. And if we refresh now, we can see that we're setting the username to be Jack Franklin based on that URL. And if I add 123 on the end here and hit enter, we get Jack Franklin 123 in the text box. So that's a good first step to see how we can keep some data in our model in sync as the URL changes. Next up, every time the URL changes, we actually want to make a request to GitHub to fetch the person's data. So if I visit /Jack Franklin, it should immediately make a request to do that. After that, we'll then make it so the user can hit enter in the search form, and it will update the URL and make the request to fetch their data at the same time. So you can see here in my update function, I have the URL change case branch that we've been writing. I also have this fetch GitHub data message. This is the one that gets sent when the user submits the form, and it does some stuff with the model and then batches up a couple of commands to make a request to the GitHub API to grab the user's GitHub repositories and also their profile. It's actually this fetch GitHub data message that we want to trigger. We want to trigger the code within it when the URL changes. So for now, what I'm going to do is literally copy and paste this code up into the URL change branch. So in here, what we want to say is the new model will be the model. We're going to set the results and the loading states accordingly. We'll also set the username to be the username. We'll bring this command down into the in, and we'll say in new model, and then the command.batch. So we don't need that. We'll just do a bit of tidying here. And then once I fix my syntax errors, that code is now formatting and compiling correctly. So we're creating the username, we're setting the new model, and we're returning that new model and the 2 commands that we need to be back. And there's one more thing I need to do to make this code work. This reference to model.username is now incorrect because by this point we've updated the model with the new username. But of course that's stored in the record new model, not model. So I could refer to new model.username here, or we have this let value username, so I'll just refer to username there instead. So if I refresh with Jack Franklin 123, you'll see there's still an error. This is because that user doesn't exist on GitHub, so that's erroring correctly. However, if I change to Jack Franklin and refresh the page, you'll see that now the text box is populated with my name and all my GitHub data is loaded instantly as I load the page. So this app is now responding to URL changes as we would expect. There's one final bit of the puzzle though. If I do enter another name here and hit enter, we get the error as expected because Jack Franklin 123 isn't a correct GitHub username. But we're not updating the URL up here. What we need to do is make it when we submit the form that we just trigger a URL change. By triggering that URL change, that will then cause all our code to fetch the GitHub data to trigger because it will go through the URL change branch of our update function. So there is a function navigation provides called new URL, which takes the user to a new URL. So when they hit submit, we need to take them to / with the new name they've entered into the text box. That will trigger a URL change function, which will update all the rest of the data we need to across the app. In fetch GitHub data, all we need to do is call navigation.newURL, and we need to append a / for the path and then put model.username, and we can delete all of that. Now this is a command, so we need to return a tuple with the model, which we're not going to touch, we'll leave it all be, and then that command. So now if I'm at Jack Franklin, I'm at /Jack Franklin, I get all my data. If I change the name here to Evan CZ, and hit enter, we now get Evan's profile, and we can see that he's got much more high percentage of Elm repositories than me, unsurprisingly. But more importantly, you can see the URL changed up here to his username as well. And if I highlight this and go back to Jack Franklin, you'll see the URL change again, and we can refresh this page and it all works as expected. There's one more bug I want to fix before we leave this, and this is going now to the home page directly. You can see if we do that, we now get an error because we tried to look up this non-existent username. What we need to do is alter our behavior in the URL change branch. And if the username is empty, then we should just return out and show absolutely nothing. This is a simple change. We have this username here, which is the path name without the starting character, which will be the /. In here, we just say if string.isEmpty username. Then we don't want to return the new model. We want to ignore all that entirely. So we'll say then we'll just return the initial model and no commands, which is command.none. Else we'll return that new model. So now visiting the home page gets us a blank page. And if I type in a username and hit enter, we do get that person's profile. If I refresh the page, we're still on that profile. If you would like to see the code, I've actually created a pull request on the Do Even Elm repository on GitHub, which is entirely open source, and you can see all the changes that I've made in this video. If you have any questions, you can leave them as a YouTube comment, or you can tweet me as @Jack_Franklin on Twitter. And thank you very much for watching.